Okay guys, today we're going to take a look at two Fosi Audio amps and we're going to have them hooked up to this minimalistic system. We're going to take a look at their build quality features, and we're going to ask the question whether or not these guys can power KEF LS50s. Cool. So first I'd like to talk a little bit about build quality. What makes these amps unique is their power rating. Both of these amps will do a crazy amount of wattage for their size and their price, which makes them pretty groundbreaking in this day and age. The Fosi Audio ZA3 will deliver 180 watts, and this amp can also do, you can also buy two of these and run them in mono, and when you run them in mono, it then increases the power rating to 235 watts per channel. Yeah, it's pretty badass. And then the Z3 monos, those you have to buy two of them. And when you go online, you can take a look. You might see a couple listings for different power bricks that it comes with. With both of these amplifiers, my recommendation is to go and just get the 48 volt power supply because that's going to immediately give you that additional headroom and increase in power rating. One of the cool special features of the ZA3 is that this guy has a subwoofer out. So if you wanted to run, say, like two of these guys, you could power left and right channel, and then you could have two subwoofers powering left and right individually. Both of these amps have balanced inputs as well as RCA. The balanced inputs are like a combination of a TRS or a 1/4 inch TRS slash balanced. Both of these guys are going to have some features on the front, really basic. The ZA3 is giving you a volume control, and then you get two rocker switches. The rocker switches on the front, one of them will allow you to switch between mono and stereo. So again, if you're going to run two of these, you would have that rocker switch set to mono. And then of course, if you're going to run one, you would just have it set to stereo. The other rocker switch here is going to allow you to switch over between XLR and then RCA. So, you know, if you wanted to, you could actually run both balanced in either stereo. So there you go. It should be noted that the balanced is reported from other people as this is not truly balanced. You know, I don't have an issue with this in my system. I've got schiit freya that I have ran balanced into this that works just fine. Let me talk a little bit about the system that I'm going to be playing these through today. For a basic source, we're going to be using a Bluesound Node. This is a 2021 edition. Now, for the purpose of this setup, we're not going to use a DAC. I'm just going to be using the DAC that's built into the Node because I want to use that as a reference point. You know, I can talk a little bit more in terms of sound quality with an additional DAC and what that will provide. But, you know, I'll talk about what it sounds like for the purposes of this review with just the Bluesound. And then the speakers that we'll be using are these KEF LS50s. Well, the reason why I'm really interested in these amplifiers is because it's been reported that these will power really demanding speakers. And I've had the KEF LS50s now for a very long time, and I consider these demanding speakers. So I'll try to talk a little bit about sound performance as it relates to kind of both of them. I'll try to break them down, but I might be jumping back and forth throughout the process of this, but I'll do my best because I think for the most part, both of these amps have similar tonal characteristics, but I do think that there's a slight more leaning toward a more warmer sound with the ZA3. And I think depending on your setup with what kind of speakers you need, this may be the option for you. And then the Z3s might be a better option for you if you have more demanding speakers. I love these amps, and I'll just say that. I mean, I'm truly blown away at their performance for their price. Knowing that I have bought $400 vintage amps in the past that have caused me a lot of agony and issues with them breaking and things like that. So both of these amps, I just want to say, I think are incredible value in somebody looking to start off in this hobby. If you're just getting going, like this is where I would start, and I would focus my money and spending money in speakers, or you know, perhaps just getting your first dozen records. Truly, I think there's a better use case for your money and kind of front loading that on your speakers and the music, and then, you know, focus on your amp later on. And so I'm really interested in this, in how can either of these really be utilized in starter setups? I think there's some great opportunity here for people getting into hi-fi right now. The Z3 monos, to get 2 of those with the 48 power supplies, I think those are about, I think that's gonna run you about $300, give or take. I know the price of these has kind of fluctuated up and down, and when I purchased these, I think I paid like $138 for, and then the Fosi V3 monos, I think I paid $100. So yeah, I paid $200, and then I bought the power bricks. So for $300, I have to say that I think that both of these amps, you know, depending on the type of speakers that you have or that you're looking to get, I think you're going to be so surprised by the performance with these amps. And, you know, I think comparing these to a more robust Class 8 amp or even my tube amp over here, the things that you lose out on are body, maybe warmth, maybe overall size in the soundstage, in the depth and the width. You lose some of those things, but in terms of dynamics and clarity and pace and rhythm, I think these things punch so far above their weight, and that's what makes them a great, I think, starter amp, because for somebody getting into this hobby, you can pick these up and pair them with like a set of used KEF LS50s, and I think immediately get a large portion of these characteristics and traits that you get with much more expensive systems. And so it'll get you into the realm of hearing your first kind of instrument separation and dynamics, and kind of learning what space and what these other more expensive amps can do. And it does it at such a fraction of the price that, you know, for $300, just go ahead and pick up 2. And I think even if your speakers don't necessarily need 2, you might just, you'll just have that extra overhead that I think, like, why not? Because it's so cheap, you know? And then with the ZA3s, I think with the sub out, I think that gives you even more kind of like opportunity to like expand your system in the future. So, you know, for the majority of my purposes, I think I found the Z3 monos to be better suited for this setup, only because I think that my speakers benefited from that additional overhead. The Z3 monos will do like 230 or 200 and, yeah, so sorry. So the Z3 monos will do 240 watts into 4 ohms. And that's with the 48 volt power supply. And then in addition to that, the Z3 monos have 2 gain settings. You know, so if you find that it's just not enough power, not enough overhead, you know, you got a little bit more flexure in the. I think that my overall impressions of the Z3 monos is that they're really good with creating a sense of pace and rhythm. And I felt, you know, I listened to a lot of Thievery Corporation on these things, and the mid bass had such great texture, but then it's like these things can really, I think, still create that sense of punch and dynamic. For me, the Z3 monos provide more of an edge of seat listening experience. I don't think that I would categorize the Z3 monos as being laid back by any means, but at the same time, like, these things are not abrasive, they're not clinical or really like plastic sounding. I think that there's a sense of musicality and naturalness to them, again, that just kind of really blows me away at this price point. I think for my review purposes, I'm talking about these as they sound just through the Blue Sound node with the node's internal DAC. And the DAC in the node, I think, does lend itself to being a more warmer DAC. And so, you know, possibly that's helping roll off some of the highs that I think you typically would get with like some of these cheaper Chinese amps. A song that I like to listen to kind of test out the highs is this song Holding Back the Years by Simply Red. You know, that song has such sharp highs, but I never once really felt fatigued by them. As far as like soundstage and imaging on both of these, I think they're impressive, but again, they're not going to be the widest soundstage or the deepest or the most spatial. There's instrument separation here, but I wouldn't say that their hallmark is that, and I wouldn't say that their hallmark is creating like air or a sense of space between notes. I guess I would categorize both of these as having a more collapsed soundstage, but I think typically when you get that collapsed soundstage, you're also getting more impact, basically just like a more edge of seat like listening experience. For me, they make me want to dance. They make me want to get up because they really can get into the groove and hold that, which is, you know, maybe why one of the challenges I have is in my experience is I go back and forth between, say, like this tube amp and then maybe this desire to have a more like edge of seat listening experience, because I think both will lend themselves to different genres. You know, while listening to these through all kinds of music, whether it's hip hop or it's indie rock, they sound great. You know, that being said, so I'm listening to an Ella Fitzgerald song or album, and it's like, you know, there's such an updated sound in a sense of like how this music sounds on these Class Ds versus how they sound on this. My line magnetic immediately transports you to, you know, a dimly lit bar, and you have a cocktail in your hand. And I don't know why that is, because it just has a sense of smoothness and musicality that is so buttery and beautiful. Yeah. And so, like, by comparison, I think the Z3 monos are gonna give you, more dynamics, and a more liveliness, you know. And so just to compare like the Fosi audios between this and this, I think what you're getting here is an amplifier that has less bloom, it has less air, and it's got less space between them. That being said, there is such a palpable, visceral texture to the music in this that I think makes you want to lean in, it makes you want to engage. But so that, you know, this making you want to lean in, it makes you want to listen to the music a little bit more, in a sense of wanting to listen into the track. The ZA3 mono, I think by comparison to the Z3 monos, is going to be a little bit thinner, but it's also going to be a little bit smoother and perhaps a little bit more mid-range. To me, it sounds smoother and perhaps maybe a little bit more rolled off in the top end, just slightly. You know, but both of these, I would categorize these as very neutral and transparent and engaging. So let me talk a little bit about who I think these amps are for and maybe who should buy them. I see a couple different scenarios where maybe you've got aspirations for a very minimal setup. You want to get a little streamer, you could hook that up. You know, you could get the Wim Mini, the little puck one that costs $100, and you could run RCA out of that into one of these. And you could use the volume control on your phone, and you could have this very minimal setup. You know, that being said, essentially this could compete with your all-in-one speaker. Maybe you don't want to go get some all-in-one speaker where the electronics are built into the speaker, and then later on you want to upgrade one or the other and you're kind of stuck with that setup. You know, if you have aspirations to expand beyond an all-in-one, but maybe you want to start with an all-in-one, again, I think this is a kind of an option for that. I think these amps are going to be great for people that just want clarity. I think if you're listening to a lot of modern day music, a lot of modern recordings, electronic based music, things with a ton of detail, a ton of texture, I think that these amps are going to be great for that purpose. These are basic amps. These amps are going to be good all-arounders. And that's how I would consider and be looking at these amps, guys. Like I said, these amps have great prat. In my opinion, I think that the pace, the rhythm, these are great with TV and movies and video games. If you have a PlayStation 5 or something like that, you need to get extra audio, you want to hook up some speakers to your PS5. I think it's a great option. With these speakers, I think if you're looking for a big, bloomy, warm, full-bodied sound, I think that you should probably look elsewhere, or you should consider what can I pair with these to increase the weight or the mass of the sound. You could explore tube amps, you could explore other different kinds of headphone amplifiers, you know, and you could put those in between. You could even look at using an EQ in between. I also want to touch on this a bit too, but both of these amps, one of the unique cool features is that they have op amps that can be swapped in and out. So both of these, I believe, have separate op amps per input, and I think both of them do that. I think if your goal is to, right out of the gate, is to play around with op amps and explore which ones sound the best, perhaps look at the ZA3s, because these are a much larger chassis. They're a little bit taller, and I think you can fit more options into these than the Z3 monos. I know there's some Sparkos, there's some that are like vertical that stick straight up almost like a tube. And in those cases, I believe you're gonna have to cut holes in both of these to fit those into here. There's a guy on YouTube that did it, and it's really cool. You should check it out. I'll try to find a link to it, and I'll try to put it in the video below. So I did hook up a DAC to both of these setups, and the DAC that I use is a topping D50. With the D50 hooked up to this, the D50 is just a much blacker background than the DAC in the Blue Sound. I get more dynamics, I get a little bit more space, a little bit larger soundstage, a little bit deeper. It's a little bit more clear, a little bit more dynamic. You know, but essentially the characteristics of these amplifiers all remains the same. And what we're given is just more clarity, more detail, more of a lens, or more of a view into the music. And that's what we're gonna get with it, with an outboard DAC. And so, you know, depending on how you wanna set up your system and how you wanna develop synergy with them, perhaps you've got warmer speakers and you wanna pair one of these colder Class D amps with that speaker, you know, and then from there, how you wanna think about your DAC either being neutral, warm, cold. So there's some opportunity in there, I think, even more to change the sound of these through your preamp, through your headphone amp, or even your DAC selection. And then in addition, you've got your op amps that you can swap in and out of. Ultimately, these are amplifiers that are aimed at starter hi-fi setups. And for people who are just starting off, who maybe want to just explore the world of audio, maybe you have some old speakers already laying in the basement somewhere in an attic, and you just want to go get an amplifier to hook them up. I think that's a great option, you know. Granted, when you fully load out like these, I think, you know, so like $130 for these, plus you need 2 of them, plus the 48-volt power supplies. The op amps can be really expensive. They can get up there into the $100, $200. So, you know, there could be $300 worth of op amp upgrades that you put in this, plus the $300, plus the power supplies. You know, I could see people spending upwards of $700, $800 on a pair of these. And, you know, perhaps at that point you say, well, is that really worth the money then? Because maybe I can go find an all-in-one integrated for $1,000, right? So, you know, perhaps this is still maybe made for somebody that is looking to keep and stay in the world of separate systems. So in addition to the KEF LS50s, I've listened to both of these amplifiers hooked up to some Magnapan LRS Plus. And, you know, there again, those speakers are so notorious for being difficult to drive. The speakers are my friends, and when we hooked them up, I was truly not expecting them to sound that great, nor did I really expect them to activate them the way that they did. But, you know, we listened to music on them all weekend long, and it just kept blowing our minds. It's like, you know, how great these sound. And In my findings, I found that the ZA3, I found that I needed 2 of these to really adequately drive the KEFs, and that led me to keeping the Z3 monos because they're true balanced. And when I have them hooked up to my schiit Freya Plus, I use the balanced output. So I ended up returning one of these, but in his setup, the ZA3 in mono mode was what he preferred, and so he's going to run 2 of these, and then eventually he's going to run 2 subwoofers out, which I think will be really cool. For his system, that's $300 worth of amplifier and then $1,000 worth of speaker, and for $1,300 he has like one of the best systems that you'll ever hear, right? One system you could be building out here would be like just getting a used node. You could then hook that up to these and get yourself a pair of used caps or a pair of used, ELAC debut 2.1s or 5.0s or something like that, and have like the kit, just like the most amazing little system, right? So you may be wondering, oh, but why wouldn't I just get a WIM power amp or one of these other all-in-one solutions? And the WIM power amp is going to be like a $300 all-in-one solution. The WIM power amp will be a great option, but you're stuck with the DAC, you're stuck with everything all in one. And if you want to expand or grow out later on, that could just remain your streamer. If you're somebody that has an older node, or you want to look at a much cheaper streamer, something like $99, you can get a $100 streamer. You can get one of these for $140, and you're set for $240. You have your source and your power, and then you just need to get yourself a pair of speakers. This has been Nick's Listening Space. I'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.